Guys, welcome back. All right, welcome back. Let me just start with that. I didn't release an episode last week, but that's because I was preparing to drop 2 episodes this week. This is a series, and we're going to talk about idols. I can already tell that this is going to be one of my favorite episodes, not because of the content, but because I have already received a revelation, but I'm sure and I'm expectant that I'm going to get yet another one as I am speaking. Not one for you as a listener, but for me, the one talking, because this is a topic that relates directly with what I've been facing just this weekend. This weekend, I'm referring to a few days before I'm releasing this episode, literally a few days before. And that's the best thing about God. One of the best things, at least, that I love about God. He is always on time. This is something that I had to see for myself. I had to experience for myself. Because when I'm telling y'all about what an idol is and how to tackle modern day idols, I'm not just saying it from a theory perspective. I'm saying it as someone who got to see that I'm actually not as holy as I thought. Yeah. I'm not keeping the second. Is it the second or the first commandment? I believe it's a first, right? To worship no other God but me. I have been worshiping a lot of gods. And that's what we want to expose today. What are the gods in your life? What are the idols in your life? So, as we're jumping into that, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Hazel Mima. I'm your host, and you are in the 2 or 3 pod where God is in our midst. I mean, let's just start with definitions because we're exposing modern day idols. We're going to start with what an idol means. I personally still can't even believe what I've gotten to know about this. The ways that so many of us are in bondage, are in relations that we don't even have control over. And the worst part is that we are ignorant of that fact. We are ignorant of the fact that we have no control. We think we're just living. We think that these are just common, normal things. But let me not get into that yet. Idol. Wikipedia is telling us, and I'm just going to summarize this, that this is a human made object that is worshipped for what it represents. Yeah. And idols, based on what Google and Wikipedia was saying, idols relate to the aspects of devotion, reverence, and affection. Yeah, I hope you're with me because this is going to be a sequential definition as we move into what the Bible says an idol is. So we've said it's a human made object. And from the Old Testament, especially, we saw the Israelites fighting with all of these nations that worshipped other gods, the most known being Baal. And those were human made objects. We saw the Israelites in the wilderness making a golden calf from the jewelry that they got from Egypt, and that is a human made object, right? But now in our modern day world, we're not talking about anything carved out of wood. We're not talking about molten images. We're talking about phones. We're talking about relationships, friendships. We're talking about our jobs, which are all human made objects. Now, I talked about relationships and friendships. Though they are not objects, they are unions that we form as human beings. And so that's why I've put it under the same category. And so we also want to just make that comparison, seeing the similarities and differences, if any, between the idols that we know from the Bible and the idols that we have right now, because those are the ones that we want to expose, right? So any human-made object that is worshipped for what it represents is an idol, according to Wikipedia. And this idol is something that we throw our devotion into, is something that we revere, we respect highly, hold in high regard, and it is something that we have affection for. And at this point, it still seemed a bit shallow to me because I don't know, I think I just love words. And I know that that's a weird way to put it for someone who's just said that they love words, but I love words and I love how words come together and I love the impact that they have when you actually get to see what someone was trying to communicate. And so at this point, it still felt a bit shallow. So I went into the definition of what devotion is. Yeah. And that's when it started hitting me. It said that devotion speaks to something you love, something that you're loyal to, and get this, something that you're enthusiastic about. And for me, why it spoke to me is because it had me thinking that the mere fact that I might be more excited to go out with my friends and spend time with my friends, go out and eat, the mere fact that I'm more enthusiastic about doing my work rather than spending time with God. I'm more enthusiastic about staying home, sleeping in, binge watching rather than going to church. I'm more enthusiastic about going out on a weekend instead of going and serving God in His house. I'm already one step closer to building an idol of that thing, of that action. Guys, and the other reason why it stood out to me is because most of the times when we get enthusiastic about something, we don't even have to do the thing first for that spike of dopamine to hit us. What am I trying to allude to? Just the thought of doing something sometimes already has us excited. And at this point, it started shifting my perspective. We said that idols are human made objects from Wikipedia. But now, when we talk about devotion and when we talk about this level of enthusiasm, then we get to see that idols are not only objects that are tangible, but they can easily come in the form of thoughts. Now, Kwambia, we are going to break this down. We're going to break this down. I mean, just the thought of something making you more enthusiastic compared to the excitement that you get from godly and kingdom matters. I mean, just that can become an idol. What you love, what you're loyal to, what you respect, what you're affectionate towards. And I think that this is already common knowledge at this point, but let me not assume. Idols don't have to be inherently bad. Idols don't have to be against the Ten Commandments. They don't have to be against the law. They don't have to be, drunkenness, covetousness, and all these other vices that are mentioned in the Bible. They don't have to be inherently bad. They don't even have to be crimes. They don't have to be things that society disapproves of. Anything good can be an idol. And I believe that that's something a lot of us already know. It's the same principle of sugar. I mean, the same principle behind sugar and oil and salt, things that are really good in moderation, but past a certain limit, they become dangerous. That's the same thing and the same thought behind idols. Anything good can become an idol. And I even gave the example of work. If I'm staying home to do my work every single Sunday, every single weekend, every single weekday, I'm still grinding. Work isn't a bad thing. In fact, the Bible encourages us to work, to not be lazy, to later on now give 10% of the proceeds back to God. I mean, it's a biblical concept. But if we now replace the devotion that we have towards God and put it into this thing that was meant to be good, then we're making it an idol. Even as I'm saying that, it's making me realize that that's exactly what the enemy does. Exactly. If you know how he works, just from the beginning, he takes what is good from God, every idea, every principle, every creation, and he corrupts it. So if God made man and woman, for example, just from Genesis, then the enemy comes in and says that, oh, you don't have to be like that. Marriages can come in all forms. Corruption of what was already existing. And that's the same thing that these idols that you put up on altars do. The same devotion that we should have been giving to God is now being translated to this image, to this object, to this thought. And now it's even coming back to me because this is a message that I began preparing such a long time ago. And it's only until recently that it was completed. And a status that one of my friends posted had something to do with its completion. It played a part in it. And this status basically said that addictions are proof that we have a capacity and we're able to have a deep devotion for something. And it was alluding to the fact that that devotion was meant to be directed towards God. If you can be consumed, and I believe that that's where the aspect of idols can come in form of thoughts. Because if you've ever been addicted to something, I definitely have. This isn't just something that gets you in the action. If someone is addicted to drugs, they don't just do drugs. They think about drugs. They talk about drugs. When they get money, the first thing they think about, I won't say the first thing, I've never been in such a situation, but for argument's sake, the addiction is bred in the thoughts. The mere fact that I may not even have access to drugs right now. I'm in an official setup, I'm in a formal setup, I'm in class, but immediately it ends, I know where I'm going. It's planned. And that's devotion. That's actually what devotion is. Something that not only consumes the actions that we take part in, but it consumes our thoughts, our energy, our time, our money, resources. Devotion. And up until this point, if you cannot think of anything in your life that is a modern day idol, don't worry, because we're just getting started. We're just getting started. Now, I said that this is a message that I started preparing quite a long time ago, and it was attributed to a sermon that I watched by Pastor Stephanie. Back then I really used to listen to her. And she basically said that if you want to recognize an idol in your life, I'm sure that wasn't the message, but it's probably what I took from it. And she said that if A happened, if a certain thing happened, then I'd probably stop trusting God. Now, fill in what A is in your life. If this thing happened, I'd stop trusting God. When I see how much effort I've put into this thing, if it doesn't happen, I'd start questioning my faith. That's an idol. What is that thing that will take you and bring you out of character, that will steal your faith? That thing that will start pulling you away from God if it ever happens or it doesn't happen for that matter. That thing that will cause you to lack integrity. And this is probably where a lot of idols fall. Money being the first one. The Bible says that the love of money is the root cause of all evil because it speaks to greed. It speaks to covetousness. So much can now fall under that. What will cause you to lack integrity? And I remember talking to someone, and this is someone really close, but let me just leave it at someone because I'm not here to expose identities. We were talking about this story, the Minnesota scandal. I know most of you probably know about it. And the person basically said that, what these people are doing is wrong, defrauding the government for personal gain. And this person was like, I don't even care much about the fact that they're defrauding the government, but why are they using such an innocent cause as an excuse for what they're doing, right? You're saying that you have, was it an orphanage, I believe? These people said that they were running something to do with kids, but they were actually just siphoning money from the government. This person was in disagreement. They disapproved heavily of what they were doing. But guess what? They ended up saying that, if someone came to me and said that this X amount of money is needed to get my dream car, basi mi napiga napiga heist moja mwecheche. I mean, it sounds funny, and it was funny. It sounded funny. But when you really get to the core of it, that is something that will cause them to lack integrity, that will cause them to compromise on their morals and on their values, because they've just expressed the fact that this is wrong. But if I was in this situation, I'd also do it. What is it in your life that will cause you to compromise? And I believe that this is my experience with exposing an idol. As I said, I got to experience something, a series of events this past weekend that brought this topic home for me and really personalized it. And so for me, it was something that made me compromise. I don't know if I should tell you all. I probably should. It doesn't really matter that much. It's Netflix. Now, as I said, I didn't really think that I had idols in my life, much less binge watching as one of them. And this is also the point where I got to realize that idols aren't just inherently, they aren't just this, it's not an aspect that's straightforward. I don't know how else to communicate that. But when I say Netflix, Netflix can be an idol for thousands of people, but for different reasons. Yeah. So stay with me on this. And honestly, at this point, you should be writing notes. I I wish I said this in the beginning. I forgot. I just forgot. But this is one of those episodes that you genuinely just need to write something down, because there's so many factors to consider if you're trying to expose idols in your life. And I don't think you're going to remember them offhand. So far, we've probably named more than five already, and we haven't even gone to the scriptures yet. So, if you can, just write something down. But anyway, for me, I got to see that Netflix, such a mundane platform. I mean, I'm not discrediting it or downgrading it. Definitely not. I'm just saying that out of all the things that could have been idols, you know what I mean? Like Netflix, like watching movies, watching a series. And as I was saying, it can be an idol for different reasons. And I'm going to use what I recognized as an idol as an example to bring this point home. Now, for me, I was in a situation that really took me away from God's presence, I believe. I just felt very empty spiritually. And instead of going back to God, instead of seeking Him, instead of going back to that throne of grace where I would obtain mercy and His gracious favor, as Hebrews tells us, I spent the rest of my afternoon binge watching. Yeah. And in that moment, Netflix became my safe refuge. It became, quote unquote, the name that I ran to and was safe. I don't know if you know the scriptures I'm alluding to, then you're starting to get the point. It became my God in that moment. The thing that I ran to instead of the one true God that I should have called upon. And that was my example. That was my case. But Netflix, let's just stick to this same example. Netflix can be someone else's idol because it is that thing that they run to instead of doing their work. It becomes their platform for procrastination. That thing that they go and do instead of doing the things that they should be focusing on, right? And I believe that this is now the version that most people relate to. So as I'm saying, idols can be similar. We can have the same idols, but for different reasons. Because that wasn't the case for me. And it probably isn't the case for someone else. But it's the same thing. It's binge watching. And so even as we're recognizing the idols, we need to remember and we need to be careful to actually pinpoint why they're idols. Because if we don't get the why, we'll easily just replace this with something else. In that moment, Netflix could have easily been food for me. It could have easily been a phone call to a friend for me. But the point still remains that I need to go and talk to God in this moment. And if I don't recognize why I'm running to other things, I'll easily just replace this Netflix with something else. It's the principle behind it that matters. Moving on from that, what has a hold on your heart? I mean, before I started recording this, I actually had to delete Netflix. As I said, it's not really about the Netflix. It's about the fact that I needed to go to God. And I was replacing that need with something else that would distract me and take my time, take my mind away from what I actually had to address. But I still have to delete the Netflix. And as I was about to press uninstall, that message that it gives you to confirm if you really want to delete it, I hesitated. I hesitated. And actually, coming to think about it, I'm like, why can't I just delete this? It was a bit of a revelatory moment for me. Yeah. What has a hold on your heart? What can't you just let go of? There's a struggle within you to just let go of this thing, to let go of this person, to let go of this idea, of the thought of something. What has a hold on your heart? And now we're going to read the scripture. I can't believe this episode is getting this long, but I almost suspected that it would, and that's why we have two parts. But First John chapter 5 and verse 21 is telling us, little children, and it's not talking about children, so it had to clarify. Believers, little children, guard yourselves from idols. And in most Bible versions, that's just where the verse ends, because this is the very last verse before we move to Second John. So that's how First John ends. Little children, guard yourselves from idols. Bus. Like that's it. And the first time I read it, my definition of idols hadn't been expanded to what you're talking about now. And so for me, I still thought of, molten, graven images, carved images, all of that existed back then, still exists. Let's just say other idols are taking over. Yeah. So back then, I actually had to have my mind expanded. What do these idols entail? What is John talking about? So from the amplified version, it's telling us that idols are false teachings. Yeah, false teachings. They are moral compromises, and they're anything that would take God's place in your heart. That's the first thing that stood out to me. It's anything. An idol can be anything, which also just circles back to what we said. Anything that is considered good can still be an idol. It doesn't have to be inherently bad. Anything that can take God's place, and that will take God's place in our hearts, is an idol. God's place as our Father, God's place as our defender, God's place as our comforter, and that place that we run to when things are not okay. Anything that would take His place in our hearts. And I also love how he talks about false teachings and moral compromises, because these aren't necessarily tangible things. They really cover a wide spectrum. By the time you compromise your morals, that begins with your thoughts, first of all. It begins with our thoughts. It translates to our words. It translates to, finally, our actions, which now become habits. So moral compromises, they cast such a wide net. And false teachings, which was really surprising. For this other person, they're obsessed with listening to preachings telling them about how God is going to help them. Preachings that don't really center on salvation or Jesus. I know you all have heard of certain churches that are like that. And we're being told that even those false teachings can become idols. That is wild, come to think of it. Even I need to write notes, man. Then the idols just keep on coming. They just keep on coming. But anyway, I don't know where I got this phrase. I don't know if I'm the one who came up with it. As I said, I started preparing this such a long time ago. But keep in mind that once we start bowing down to something or to someone, No, actually, let me just phrase it as a question. Once we start bowing down to something or someone, do we still believe that we can have power over them? And my friend also ended up posting this TikTok that I believe I reshared. And this guy was saying that idols are no longer those wooden, silver, gold images from the Old Testament. They are now in form of minerals and rocks, and these things are now carved in form of phones, and that's what we are bowing our heads to day and night. That's what we are breaking our necks for day and night. Once we bow down to something, once we bow to something, sorry, do we still think that you can have power over it? I don't want to even start talking about the examples of idols because that's what we're going to talk about in the second series, or rather, the second episode of the series. But the phone, our phones, our gadgets are the easiest example for this statement. And just to keep in mind that we're not having graven images, but we're still bowing to things, quite literally. We need to recognize those areas of our lives that will steer us away from what God has called us into. And this is another idol recognition point. What is that area that has steered you away from what God has called you into? And I believe the easiest example for this is career wise. Although last time, I'm not sure which episode, but it was pretty recent. We talked about how our purposes are not just career based, but that's not to say that our careers aren't a huge pulling factor in the fulfillment of our purpose. Now, I remember a scenario, or rather, this podcaster. I don't know what to call her. She's a YouTuber, yeah? And she was telling her story about how her dad has been working in this well-paying job, millions streaming in probably every month. And they're a big family, so the money is actually necessary to sustain them. But the guy was also a part-time pastor, yeah? And this part-time pastor job wasn't very well paying, if at all it was paying. Because if I remember the story well, he was volunteering on the weekends. But now he loses his job, well-paying job. He can't support his family for quite a while. Every single job he goes and interviews for is instant, failure, regrets. We can't take you in, all of that. And he just struggled to get a job after that until God finally spoke to him, or rather, he opened up to what God was saying. And he was told that he should go into full-time ministry. So now I'm imagining if this person held that aspect of money in high regard in his life, and it's for a good cause. That's what we're saying. Like, idols don't even have to be bad. Because as I said, this is a huge family. He actually needs the money to support them. But if he saw that money as more important than what God was calling him into, a pastor cannot be earning more than what he was earning in his previous job, for sure. But that was his calling. These idols, we shouldn't let them blind us to what God is calling us into. This needs a crazy assessment. As we've seen in this example, it's not a visible thing. For us to recognize some of these idols, guys, we also need to be aware of our weaknesses, our weak points, points of compromise, as we said, weaknesses, insecurities, things that will make us act out of lack, out of fear, out of scarcity, having a scarcity mindset, our weaknesses. You get what I mean? And for the last scripture of the day, we're going to read from Colossians chapter 3 and verse 5. And it's saying, so put to death and deprive of power the evil longings of your earthly body with its sensual, self-centered instincts, immorality, impurity, sinful passion, evil desire, and greed, which is a kind of idolatry, in brackets, because it replaces your devotion to God. And when I read this, I instantly knew that this was going to be part of the introduction. But here we have it right now. And this is just as a point of emphasis, because remember, when we were beginning, we started with a Wikipedia definition, and it still brought out the aspect of devotion. But the Bible is telling us that idolatry, the things that we are worshiping, the things that we're spending time on, spending energy and resources on, they're idols because they replace our devotion to God. To God. These aren't just things that are taking away our devotion. It's also telling us where that devotion should be going to. And that's the mark of an idol. And just for context, from chapter 3, verse 1, it was talking about how we have put on a new self because we've been raised with Christ. We should start seeking and keep seeking the things that are above, where Christ is, and stop focusing on these sins and habitual things of the flesh. Stop focusing on the things that are on earth. And if I'm not wrong, Paul wrote Colossians. He also wrote the book of Romans. And in chapter 8, he has the same ideas. Set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are here on earth. Set your mind on things of the spirit, not things of the flesh. He's saying that we died to this world through Christ. And when Christ was raised back to life, we are also raised with him. So put to death and deprive of power the evil longings of your earthly body. It's almost giving us a guide, not even almost, it is giving us a guide on what to do. How do you put down the idols in your life? How do you put down those things that are actually contending against the fighting for your attention, the attention that you should be giving to God and the things of the kingdom? It's giving us a roadmap. First, by telling us that, remember, you're saved. And remember, through that redemptive power, because of the fact that Jesus was raised from the dead, you also have power. And when Christ appears, we will also appear with him in glory. So Paul starts by giving us a position of, this is where your help is coming from, right? This is where your authority is coming from. So because you know all of this, put to death all of these other things. Stop doing all of these other things. And it definitely sounds good on paper, because as someone who's been saved for a year and some months now, it's still hard. It's still a daily battle, and that's what Christianity is. But I believe the first step is knowing what you're fighting against. Because how can you put down an idol that you've never recognized? An idol that you've never been keen to notice? We don't realize sometimes that our devotion to God is being snatched away. It's being divided. Our attention is being divided. We need to first look into what these things are in our lives. Then every other thing, every other application on how to stop them, how to let go of them becomes simple. Though not easy, it becomes simple. And I believe that this is an instruction to all of us Christians, all of us believers, saved people who are trying to walk in the newness of life. We need to put down and deprive of power the longings of our earthly body. And I hope that at the end of this, you'll be a bit convicted to sit down and reckon with what is trying to take God's place in your heart and in your life, because I've certainly had to, and I'll keep doing that. Sometimes things that we definitely know aren't idols can creep up on us later on in life. And so set the roadmap right now. Get the trail blazing right now, so that when things try and creep up later on, we can actually recognize that, you're trying to take away my attention. You're trying to divide my devotion. I'm not even drawn to the action. I'm not even drawn to the thought or to the image that much, but you represent something in me that I need to address. And that's really the point of all of this, guys. There's so many things within us that we need to address, things that we probably even picked from our life before salvation, that we need to address, because in our salvation, they're coming up as modern day idols. That's just a physical manifestation, but everything in the physical stems from a spiritual point of view. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. If you followed, if you enjoyed this, I'm glad. And I hope that this blessed you. I hope it's brought you to a place where you can have a little time off for introspect, just to recognize how this may relate in your life, how it may relate in your situation, and how you can actually expose those hidden idols in your own life. So, as usual, don't forget to share this with a friend that you know might need it. Perhaps you don't even know they'll need it. Just pray on it. God might reveal something to you, or someone for that matter. And give this show a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, or whatever it is based on where you're streaming from. I'm excited to talk to you yet another time. I hope you'll be moving on to the second part of this series because this is just an introduction. So I really hope to talk to you again in that episode. Now, have yourself a lovely and an amazing day or night, depending on what time you're listening to this. Bye.